Will you also coach the tight ends, or is that position going to be shuffled around since that was obviously one of John's duties?
Yeah, haven't decided on that yet. I think both Coach Moorhead as well as Ricky Ronnie and our staff create some flexibility. So there's some of the things that we're going to be working through here in the next week or two and decide just what's in the best interest of Penn State moving forward.
Okay, appreciate it. And Joe, wondering what are some of the characteristics you look for in a quarterback within your system as far as their knowledge and what way I was explaining, they have to do a lot of stuff pre-snap as well to kind of take all that in.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the physical traits, you're going to have the position specifics that you want for height and weight and speed. And, obviously, have to have a strong enough arm, and accuracy is probably more important than arm strength to me, but the arm has to be strong enough. We do enough things in a run game where our quarterback's going to have to be, athletic and have the ability to create plays with his feet, either by design run or when the play breaks down. And obviously, like Coach mentioned, our pass game being, kind of having the foundation in the West Coast offense. There are things we ask our quarterbacks to do in terms of protection, pre-snap recognition in the run game and in the pass game, and then post-snap reads. So the guy's got to be cerebral. You'd like him to be a leader, and when he walks in a room, you don't have to ask. He's a quarterback, and that's kind of a big picture thing that and I'm excited to see what these guys can do.
Thank you.
Hey, gentlemen, Josh Moyer with ESPN. Kind of have a question for both of you. James, I'm curious at what specific point you realized that Joe was the right coordinator for Penn State, and Joe, I'm curious, at what point did you know that this was the right position for you?
As you can imagine, I was talking to a number of guys, and the more I talked to Joe, the more I believed in him and believed he was the right fit for our players and for our staff and for the university as a whole. So, it's no different than any other process. You talk to a number of people, you get excited about a number of people, but as time goes and the more conversations you have and the more research you do, that at some point the light kind of comes on. And our conversations really, probably the last week, got more specific. He was pretty upfront with me about what his intentions were, and I was pretty upfront with him. But up till that point, really all of our conversations had been over the phone, not really face-to-face, and I thought it was important for us to sit down face-to-face, go through the playbook, watch film together, really kind of grind down on the details and the specifics, because I didn't want him to come and things come up that we weren't on the same page with, and vice versa. I wanted to kind of get all those things worked through so he knew exactly what he was walking into and felt comfortable with those things. And same thing for us. So I think there just came a point, where I felt like this was the direction we wanted to go. Had that conversation with the administration, and then once I knew he was on board, then I could have some conversations with those other coaches and let them know that we were going to go, in a different direction.
We'll go to the phone lines now.
You want to respond? Sure. No, yeah, absolutely. In the same way that Coach Franklin had his criteria of what he was looking for in a coordinator, and I feel like I checked off all the boxes of the things Coach was looking for. Philosophically, all the discussions that we had, there's certain things that, as a coach, where you're looking to make a move professionally, that they need to fit for you. And they did, and I left a great situation at Fordham. I had a long-term contract. We had a tremendous amount of success. It was my alma mater. I loved our kids, but when you look at the opportunity to come to Penn State and be the offensive coordinator and be a part of a program on the rise that has great things on the horizon, and do it 2 hours from home, and my mom and dad and my wife's parents are still still live in Western PA, and to get a chance to have our kids closer to home, I think. It was mutual. I think Coach, found out that I, fit the things that he was looking for in a coordinator, and for me to make a move from Fordham and, come to Penn State, it all just fit.
And that's the other thing I would say is, I wanted to make sure that we were hiring someone that really wanted to be here And it became obvious as the process went on that not only did Joe want to be here, but his family wanted to be here. So, you know, the connections that they have to the state, you know, it made a lot of sense for everyone.
It was an incredibly difficult decision, and because of the success we've had the past 4 years, and you know that's certainly attributable to our players and our coaching staff. There have been opportunities for me to leave Fordham. You know, I had an offer after last year at the FBS level, and you know had some other things the years before. And you know, as I told all of our players and the kids that we were recruiting, you know, for me to leave Fordham, it was going to have to be a special opportunity at the FBS level. And obviously, the offensive coordinator job at Penn State is one of those opportunities. And you know, informed the team at a meeting on Saturday night. And you know, it was very emotional, but for the most part, you know, not for the most part, our kids understood, and they weren't happy to see me leave, but they certainly understood the opportunity, and you know, it just fit.
Derek LeVar, Wilkes-Barre Times leader.
Derek?
Go to Mark Wogenrich, Allentown Morning Call.
So you mentioned that initial interview, or your in-person interview with James went until almost 3 o'clock in the morning. What did you guys talk about for 4.5 hours?
Yeah, we went through everything. I mean, you know, obviously, you know, you kind of start with his personal and professional background. Then you go through all the run game schemes, and that's kind of what we started with, if I remember correctly,
Yes.
Joe. We kind of went through run game, and then the problem was we still had all the pass game to go through, and it was already 2 o'clock in the morning at that point. So, you know, and it just gave us an opportunity to kind of talk about protections, talk about run game, you know, talk about pass game, you know, talk about, you know, quarterback development, talk about, you know, O-line development, talk about all the different positions, how they're used, talked about our personnel and how it was going to fit, talked about, you know, the personnel he's had in the past. So again, talked about, you know, coming up under Walt Harris and the West Coast system, and my background in Green Bay with the Green Bay Packers and the West Coast system. So, you know, really everything. You know, talked about his son, who we offered a scholarship to, talked about his daughter, talked about his other son, his wife. I mean, you know, everything. And some of the other staff members were in there, but as the night went on, they kept tapping out, and me and Joe kind of kept going. And at some point, you know, he had a ride. I was staying at the hotel, and he had to get home. And I don't think the subway was going.
No, it was not. Metro North is shut down. It doesn't run at 2:47 in the morning.
Correct. So then it was Uber or taxi, whatever it was. So, you know, we really kind of talked through everything. And like I mentioned, we had already had probably, you know, without exaggerating, 30 conversations on the phone a couple times a day. So that helped as well.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's part of our self-scout process where, you know, the base foundation of our offense is going to remain the same, and, you know, you finish every year and you go back and you look at the cut-ups and say, all right, what are the things we did well, what are the things, you know, we did poorly, and what can we do to improve upon that? And, you know, there's variables in that as people graduate and you get new guys in, but, you know, certainly at Akron, you know, in a way is where we started, you know, at UConn in 9 and 10, I think it was a version of our offense. You know, not as much as the things that we did at Akron, and certainly not what we're doing now. But yeah, certainly, you know, we're never going to stand pat on what we do. There's always ways to improve, and you know, the base concepts of the scheme will remain the same, and we're able to tweak it, you know, year by year or week by week, you know, based on you know what we're seeing defensively or who we have personnel wise.
Bob Cohen, Pittsburgh Tribune Review.
Good afternoon, guys.
Hi, Bob.
So, what kind of player were you at Central Catholic? How many years did you start? And is it true that Fordham was the only school that offered you a scholarship?
Jeez, Bob.
Global angle.
I was
Global angle, guys.
I was a one-year starter at Fordham, or at Central Catholic. And if there's a definition of pocket passer, that would be it. I could throw the ball very well. I could not get out my own way and run a lick. So, you know, I was first team all-conference quad A, just saying. But, and then, you know, went on to Fordham and was a 3-year starter there and had a modicum of success, I'd say, you know, personally. So, yeah, I was a average football player and, you know, had some success in college.
We have time for 2 questions in the room.
Joe Neal, Riddell out to the mirror. Wondering, from Fordham calling the plays, I'm assuming you were on the field as the head coach. Would you plan to be on the field here? And will there be much transition, or will you be upstairs?
That's something that I've done both. I've called it from the booth prior and have called it from the field the last 4 years. And really a lot of that is, there's moving parts in your scheme, and I think it'll be imperative for, once the game ends, to sit down with the offensive staff and talk with the guys and see where they're most comfortable and where they fit, and make a decision there. So to say right now, I've done it both. I think we've been successful with both, but I think a lot of that is, contingent upon the other staff members and where they're comfortable as well.
Joe Mark Brennan from FightOnState.com. I'm wondering how you're going to handle this.
You look very nice today.
I was hoping you would notice,
Seeing
James.
you, the tie, and the blue variations, very nice.
But I was wondering how you're going to, Joe, handle this from a family perspective. Obviously, interesting time of year to change jobs. How difficult will it be to move and that sort of thing for your family?
Yeah, the funny thing, when Coach offered my 8-year-old quarterback son a scholarship, he looked at me and was amazed and excited. So what are you waiting for? Tell him in, yes. So that was awesome. And the thing that he's fired up by is like, Dad, we never knew. He said, now I get to play for you. I said, yeah, that would be pretty awesome. But, the great thing about it is obviously the transition in moving in the coaching profession can be difficult on a family. And, we've been in places, 4 or 5 years. And, normally the transition is most difficult on your kids. But in this instance, I was being nudged by the family to take the job more than they were concerned about it. And, my daughter was texting me on a daily basis to find out the updates from Coach Franklin, and they're excited to get home. And like I said, for them to be around their grandparents, to be around their cousins and be home, we're going to try to get them up here as quickly as we can. We're shooting for the first week of February, but, they're very excited to come back home.
James, this is for you, a different angle here. Brent Pry's name has come up as a possible candidate for the job at Georgia Southern. I'm not asking you to comment on that, but just on Brent and what he's meant to you here and at Vanderbilt and how valuable he's been to you throughout your career.
Yeah, I think you guys know kind of the history of that from when we came here. I'm a huge Brent Pry fan. He's been extremely valuable. I don't think he gets enough credit as the co-defensive coordinator in our defensive success over the last 5 years. He's my assistant head coach, and a lot of times that is just a title at a lot of places. And for us, that's not the situation. Him, Brent, and Dwight Galt are the two guys I bounce a lot of decisions off of. He's just been around football his whole life. His father was my offensive coordinator in college. Brent's first year coaching was my last year playing. We go way back. Brent is fiercely loyal, and I know his family love it at Penn State. I think Coach Moorhead's been fortunate, and I've been fortunate, but a lot of coaches like Brent, you go your whole career waiting to be somewhere and to be with someone that you're happy with. And Brent and his family, couldn't be more happy about being at Penn State and being with our staff. They're very happy. And that's a great position to be in. A lot of coaches are constantly looking. Brent's not. If a great opportunity comes, I've said from day one that I want my guys to get the opportunity to be head coaches. I don't want them to ever leave for lateral moves. And the administration has been very supportive to help us keep the staff intact. But if guys have a chance to be a head coach and that's what they want to do and it's going to make them happy and make their family happy, there's going to be nobody more supportive than me. On the same hand, I don't want to lose them. So got a lot of respect personally and professionally for Brent Pry. He's not only extremely valuable on our staff, but he's one of my best friends.
All right. Thank you, coaches Franklin and Moorhead. Thanks, everybody. We'll see everybody on Friday.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And the bowl press conference will be just about the bowl. So if you remember some questions
I was
that you
trying to
had,
get my recruiting question in.
one step at a time.
Sorry, we were talking about the scholarship.
Donovan.
Okay, thank you.
See you guys.